Welcome to another video on data to decisions. In today's video, we'll be building the stock price history chart in Microsoft Excel. And we're going to be building this chart in 5 different small steps. For example, the first one is as soon as you type in any symbol, for example, I'm going to type in for Visa, this is a symbol. So as soon as I type that in, Microsoft Excel is going to the Microsoft service and extracting the price history for Visa, and it is displaying in a line chart. So this is what we will do in the first part of the video. In the second portion, we will focus on how do we build this interactivity? How do we make this chart, instead of a daily, an interactive chart where I can do weekly or daily or monthly with a click of a button. In the third portion, we will be building these minimum and maximum points that you see as green and red circles. We'll be building it so it can automatically detect the minimum and the maximum points and display for us. In the fourth part, we will actually build the history interactive slicer, where instead of looking, for example, I'm looking at 1 year's worth of data. What if I want to only look at 6 months? So it is very interactive and it's pretty quick to pull the data that we want to see for this symbol. For the last part, we will actually focus on building these red and green columns. These represent volume of stocks or shares traded on that day, and they will automatically be red or green depending on if the price has increased from the prior period to this period or not. If it has gone down, it'll be red. If it has gone up, it'll be green. So all of this is fully dynamic. So I can type in any stock symbol and it'll pull the data from Microsoft Service. One thing I want to point out here is that you will need Microsoft 365 subscription in order to pull this data from Microsoft Service. Otherwise, all the other functionalities that we will be developing are applicable to other things that you can build using similar techniques. But if you want the stock price history to automatically come live from Microsoft Service, then you would need a Microsoft 365 subscription. So with that, let's get started with a brand new workbook. And I'm going to start by typing in column G, I'm going to say start date and end date. Okay. So we want to pull the stock history, price history for a date range. So I'm going to start with the end date. I can just make it today because I want to pull all the history, until today. So that's fine. In the start date, I can put 1/1/2024. Again, we'll change the date format so that it is something that all of us can understand. Y. There we go. Okay. So now that we have the start and end date, the other input we need is the symbol. So for example, what is the stock for which we want to pull the history for? So let's say, for example, I type in MSFT for Microsoft. And what you need to do is to go into data, change this to a stocks data type, convert to stocks, click on this button, and it'll ask you, okay, I'm trying to convert this into a stocks data type in Microsoft Excel, but I'm not sure which Microsoft MSFT you're referring to. And you see on the right side, you will see the data selector. And this is the one I want, the NASDAQ Stock Exchange. So I'm going to click on select. And now instantly you see that my Excel has put in a symbol in front of it and all that. So basically this is a data type that Microsoft is able to detect and say, this is a stocks data type. So if you click on this little option here, you will see you can pull in a lot of information about this specific symbol. Again, the focus of this video is to pull the history, so I'm not going to go further into it. I've had other videos created on the channel which goes more in depth into the stocks data type. Let's just continue with our purpose, which is to pull the date-based stock history. So I'm going to do date, and then I'm going to call this closing price. And then we also need the volume. So how am I going to get all this? I'm going to write a formula using the stock history function to do so. But before I do that, what I'd like to do is to click on this cell where we actually entered the symbol. And you can convert this into a named range. So essentially, I'm going to give a name to this, I_SYM for symbol. You can name this however you feel comfortable. I'm just going to call it I underscore SYM. So now it just makes it a little bit easier for me to write the formula. So stock history is a function. And what is the stock that I'm going to pull the data for, which is I underscore SYM, comma, what's the start date? I'm going to use this as my start date, so I'm pointing to that cell, comma, I'm going to use this as my end date, so pointing to that cell, comma, do I want daily or weekly or monthly? For now, I'm just going to say daily, okay? Comma, do I want any headers to appear? I don't want any headers to appear, so 0, comma, what are all the different columns you want as output from Microsoft Excel? So I want the date, so I'm going to press 0, comma. I also want the closing price, so I'm going to do 1, comma. I also want the volume, so 5. Again, for the purpose of this video, we're going to focus on these, but of course, if you want a high price for each day and low price for each day, you can get that as well. So I'm going to close it. And now Excel goes to the Microsoft service and pulls the data for us every single day, closing price and the volume. Now I'm just going to click on column K and I'm going to change the format so that it is something that I can easily follow as a date. So Control 1 to open the format cells, and I can go in and DD, MMM, Y. There we go. So now it's very easy to follow. What's the date? So we have the date and closing price and the volume. So it goes all the way to row 47. Now, if I change this date to 1/1/2023, January 1st, 2023, you will see now the data goes from 2023 beginning all the way to 2024 until today. Now, you will notice that the data doesn't start from 1st January and it also doesn't end on today, which is the 7th of March. This is an important thing to note that you will not have the stock price data for every single day. You will always have a few days with there is no information. For example, between 13th Jan and 17th Jan, there is no information because the stock market is closed. You would have noticed that the number of rows in this data set is dynamic. So as the dates are changing, the number of dates rows in this data will also change. So this is the key part in this video. How do we make sure that our chart can dynamically expand and contract according to the dates entered? So in order to do so, what I would like to do is to go and create a name for the date rows, another name for the closing price as well. So what I'm going to do is to go to formulas, define name, and I'm going to write a very simple formula. So index and point to the cell. This is where we wrote the stock history function. So K3 in my case. And I'm going to put a hash at the end because it's a dynamic range. It will continue to expand or contract. So comma, how many rows do I want? I want all the rows, so I'm not going to choose anything there. Another comma, and then which column do I want in these three columns? I want the date. So 1. So index of this cell, important thing is add the hash, comma, comma 1. And now I'm going to give a name to this called R underscore dates, a range of dates. So I'm using the R prefix. Press OK. We'll do the same exact step, define this time index, same thing, click on the cell K3, hash, comma, comma. This time I want the second column, which is the closing price. So I'm going to call this R underscore price. So now that we have given names to these, which are dynamic, now we are ready to go ahead and create the chart. So I'm going to go click anywhere on outside, insert, a line chart, 2D line. And we don't have anything right now in the chart, so that's why there's no data and nothing to see. Right click, select data. And here we're going to add a series, and the series name could be closing price. I can click on that. The values inside are, you can click anywhere actually in the worksheet, no problem. But you have to come back here and remove everything in after the sheet 1 exclamation mark. In my case, my sheet is named sheet 1. If you name your sheet differently, the basic point is after the exclamation mark, remove everything and just type in R underscore price. Okay. So now this tells Excel that whatever is in the named range R underscore price, use that to plot my line chart. Okay, let's say okay, come back here. It still didn't like it for some reason, so I'm going to try again. There we go. So you want to make sure that in here in the preview, you start seeing the price come through. Again, I've seen this happen to me as well, once or twice, that it doesn't immediately pick up. Not sure what Excel is looking for, but make sure that the values are coming in and then say, okay. Now, do we also want to put the x-axis or the horizontal axis? So just do the same thing, click on anywhere, and then remove the items after the exclamation mark, and then type in R underscore dates and press OK. And you want to make sure that you see the dates appear in this preview and say OK. Now you have the dates as well. So now you have a line chart which shows the closing price. And let's test it. Let's do the Visa. So we'll do it again. You may not know exactly what to type in for Visa. That's where if Microsoft doesn't or Excel doesn't recognize, it'll give you the data selector. You can just go and select. If you know exactly how to type in like XNYS colon V, that's basically the right way to put it. If you type that in, it'll understand. But if I just type in Visa, it doesn't understand. So we have to pick the right stock item from the list. So far what we have discovered is you can type in any symbol and it will prepare a line chart of the stock history. Now, can I change the dates? So I'm going to go here and say 1/1/2024, January 1st, 2024. You see that instantly it changed the chart. So we have accomplished what we want, essentially to build a dynamic chart which responds to the starting and end date that you enter, which responds to the stock symbol that you type in. So far good. So now we're just going to close this video with just formatting it. I'm just going to right click on the grid lines, format grid lines, make it less visible and distracting. I'm going to click on that. So this would be the closing price, history, and you can name, do some formatting the way you want it. I'm going to click on the chart, go to the border, put some rounded borders. I have to make sure that I select the color of the line. So there we have the rounded border. The next thing we want to do is to make sure that the axis, my Camtasia thing is coming in between. So right click and then choose format axis. And then you would want to choose and make sure that the minimum is 0. So that makes sure that it looks like this now. Then what I would do is right click on the, again, format axis is the number formatting. I am going to remove the 2 decimal places. There we go. And then on the x-axis, I want to format the x-axis as text axis instead of date. And this is going to look like this. And the other thing I wanted to do was the labels alignment. So go into the alignment size and properties. They can change the alignment. I'm going to change the text direction here to this way. So it appears like this. And there we go. So now we have a line chart, which is dynamic based on the dates, as well as any stock symbol that you can type in. So this is where we left off. We built a basic line chart. So I'm going to go and create another sheet. And in this sheet, I'm just going to create what we need to create in order to build that slicer. So I'm going to type in just simply interval, which is what we're trying to build, daily, weekly, and monthly. Okay, so let's select all of them and create a table by pressing Control T. My table has headers, great. And now I'm going to click Insert and do a pivot table. And I want a pivot table right here, no problem to keep it in the same sheet. And I will drag and drop here. So far, nothing is great here. But now we're going to click inside the pivot table, press Insert, and then insert the slicer. And then select the interval, which is the only column right now, and say, okay, so now we have a slice. Great. When you click on any of these options in the slicer, you see that the cell B12 becomes that value. Okay. So now I'm going to write a very simple formula here to say equals switch when somebody, whatever this value is in B12, that's what we will be using. Switch B12. If the value is daily, then just give me back 0. And if the value is weekly, give me back 1. If it is monthly, then give me back 2. I'll explain why we do this, but now let's make sure that it's working. So when I click on monthly, it changes to 2. When I click on weekly, it becomes 1. So it's working. So I'm going to name this switch function cell as I underscore interval. Okay. So essentially, we are capturing the user input in the slicer and putting it into this simple, cell. And now I'm going to click on the slicer, cut the slicer, go back to our chart page, and now I can paste it here. And I'm going to go back into the slicer options, change this to 3 columns, and resize it. And I want this to be, let's say, 0.5 height, 2.5 width. And you can't really see much, but what we're going to do now is to right click, or you can actually go to slicer settings by clicking here, or you can also right click and choose slicer settings, and display header. You can turn this off because we don't need, it's pretty obvious what it is, so we don't need a slicer to say that. So there we go. So now we have built the slicer, we've gotten it here. Now what it doesn't do is, doesn't do anything right now, because it is not connected to the chart. So the way we are going to connect the thing to the chart is, if you remember, in our previous video, we built the stock history, based formula. In this, the 1, 2, 3, fourth argument is interval. So we put 0 as a hard-coded value because we got only daily history. What if I don't put 0? Let's see, comma. You can see Excel expects 0, then it'll create the daily, it'll extract the daily stock price history. If it is 1, it'll extract the weekly stock price history. And if it's 2, it'll extract the monthly. So what I'm going to do is, instead of typing 0, 1, or 2, I'm going to type in I interval, which is where we are storing the user's selection, and press enter. Nothing else. We don't change anything else. So hit OK. Now let's see what is going on. So we click daily, we click monthly, we click weekly. So it seems to be there. Now I can change the start date to 2023 January. You'll have more data, and monthly, daily. So, um, so those errors that pop up sometimes when Excel is in between, when it's trying to extract the data from the service, and within a fraction of a second, sometimes those errors do pop up. If it happens to you, please let me know, and I would like to do some more research on it. But usually within a second or so, it clears and it pulls in the data correctly. Now, the other thing we have to do before we close this part of the video, order in which the daily, monthly, weekly is not really the right one. So I would want daily, weekly, and monthly. So in order to do so, I'm going to go back to the sheet. I'm going to select these 3 values, go back to Excel's options, and here go to advanced and scroll down to look for something called custom lists, edit custom lists. I'm going to click on that. And now you will see the default list, and maybe I've added something on my own. But for you, if you want to do the daily, weekly, monthly in this order, it's very quick. You can just click here, select, it's already selected for me, B5 to B7, import, daily, weekly, monthly. Okay, okay, go back to our chart. It doesn't automatically change for me. So what I had to do was go back to the slicer settings and change it to descending in the order. Descending, press OK, it changed to descending. I'll go back again and do the ascending. Essentially, it needs to be enabled and then turned on. Click on weekly again. It gives you the weekly history. If I click on monthly, it gives us the monthly history. So go back to daily, a lot more data points. So again, it's working. So I'm going to continue here by typing in another a column where we will be building the minimum price first. So I'm going to call it just MIN for minimum. And the formula that I'm going to do is if R underscore price. So if you remember from the previous video, we saw how we created a dynamic array of price values and then gave a specific name for it called R price. R price is nothing but the values in column L. So if R price equals minimum of R price, comma, then give me R price. If not, then give me NA, open parenthesis, close parenthesis, and again close. That's it. So let's type it in. It automatically fills everything. And you saw that it detected that the minimum is $207.39. And then all the other values will be NA. So what if I change the date here? So if I go 1/1/2024, January 1st, you see now that 3rd January is the lowest price. So you can clearly see that it's working. For whatever date range, it'll automatically pick it up. Now, I'm going to do a similar one for max. And this one, basically it's the same formula. If our price equals maximum of our price, then our price, otherwise NA. And there we go. And where is the maximum price? Over here on the 28th of Feb. So it's working. So now we have it. So now let's understand how we can name these values or ranges and then before introducing into the chart. Go back. Let's go back into the formulas, name manager. So you can see how we define the price. Our price is nothing but index of what is in K3, which is where we pull the stock history, comma 2 for the second column, which is the closing price. So what I'm going to do is to create a new named range, and I'm going to call it R underscore min for range of minimum series. And here I'm going to select this cell N3. So click on cell N3, which is where we have a formula, but the formula is a dynamic array. So we need to put a hash at the end. So I'm going to put a hash at the end and then press OK. Same way, do new R underscore max. And again, you can name this how you would like. The name actually doesn't, impact anything. I'm just calling it R underscore as a prefix because it's a range. Again, you're free to do what you feel comfortable. I'm going to select the maximum value where we wrote the formula. Remember that these formulas are single formula cells. We write the formula in only one cell. So we want to refer to that cell. In my case, it's O3. And make sure that you do a hash at the end. If we don't do the hash, it doesn't really bring all the values together. So press OK. So now we have defined these two ranges. Now press close. It's time for us to add those to the chart. Right click on the chart, select data, add, and I can call it minimum, MIN. And then I am going to click on any cell, doesn't matter where it is, and then remove everything after the exclamation mark. Type in R underscore min, which is the name that we gave, right? If you had given a different name, please remember to use that name. I used R underscore min, so I use it. And then for the x-axis, same thing. Click anywhere, it doesn't matter, but the sheet name should be there, exclamation mark. And then we named R underscore dates for the x-axis, so I'm going to use that. Great. Now we will add the maximum, max, and select anywhere, just R underscore max. For the x-axis, it's going to be R underscore dates. Awesome. So everything is good. Now, nothing has happened. So now we need to go back and right click and change chart type and see what kind of chart type has been assigned to the minimum and the maximum. It looks like everything is assigned as a line. So let's go to combo let's say the closing price is a line chart. So closing price is a line chart. The minimum, let's do it as a line with markers. Okay. So closing price is line, minimum and maximum line with markers, and press OK. And you already start seeing the markers there. Now, as the chart is being clicked, go to minimum series. And we don't really need a line, so I'm just going to make it a no line. But we do want the marker. So I'm going to go into the marker options, built in, and I'm going to choose a circle. And you're welcome to choose others if you prefer. But I'm going to increase the size a little bit so that it's a little bit more visible. And since this is the minimum, I can leave it as an orange or red or so. Choose the color you would like. And then in the fill, this is where you would change the colors. And then I'm not going to do a border. That's okay. And then I'm going to do the same thing for the maximum series and built-in marker. I'm going to increase the size, solid fill. This time I will do a little bit of a green, no border there. Go back to the line, no line. And let's make sure I use the same size. So 7 is for the maximum series, and for the minimum is 7 as well. Okay, so they're the same size. Now, the points are there. How do I add a label to it? So go back again, choose the minimum series. Um, did I choose the minimum or the max? Okay, I chose the maximum. That's fine. Max series plus data labels. And then once you have the data label added, you can go to more options. And because it's a maximum point, what I'm going to do is to keep it above the label position. And then I also want to bring in the category name, which is nothing but the date for us. And I want the date and the price to be in two different lines. So I'm going to choose new line. So now you'll see that it appears like this, where there is a date as well as the price for the maximum point. We're going to do exactly the same for the minimum. For the minimum, let's keep selecting minimum. Okay. And then add data label. And then go to data label options. So you can go this way, or you can go back to the drop down here if that's easier for you. Go here to the drop down, and now you will see that there is a min data labels. So go there and then go to this options. And I'm going to use the category name, which is the date. And I will choose new line. And instead of above, I'm going to do below. Again, this is my preference. So minimum, so it'll be below, max will be above. There we go. So we have a chart where the minimum and the maximum points will automatically show up, and the date and the price will appear. So let's test it. I'm going to choose another date, 1/1/2023, January 1st, 2023. The data is changing, and now you have a different minimum and a maximum points. Now let's do weekly. What if I make this as a weekly chart instead of a daily? That's fine because it's still going to go and find the minimum point for that week, the data. So this one right now, March 6th, 2023, this is the minimum from a weekly data perspective, the minimum point and then the maximum point. So can I do monthly? So click on monthly, and now it should go and update the monthly history. And we only have 12 months in 2023 and 3 months in 2024. And so 15 points. And out of these 15, February 2023 is the lowest and February 2024 is the highest. So it is working. One last check. Let's say if we want to change the symbol instead of Visa, I want to check for Microsoft. Hopefully I remember that. Yeah, okay. So we have the 15 points again, but now for Microsoft, the lowest point is January, and then the next point is again February for Microsoft. In this fourth part of the series, we are going to be building this interactive slicer where you can change the chart to look back 6 months of history, or you can look back at, for example, year to date or 1 year of history. So you can just click the slicer button and let Microsoft Excel go and pull the live data from the service and build this chart for you. Now, I'm going to go to the second sheet where we are building some helper information which are used for the chart. So I'm going to go here and then start typing in our period option. So I'm going to call it period. I'm going to do 5 days at a time. I could do 1 month, or I could do month to date. So maybe I'll do month to date first, 1 month, and then I can do 3 months, 6 months, let's say 1 year, and then we could do, let's say, no, let's do year to date, and then 1 year, and then 5 years. Again, you can expand this into more options once you understand the concept. As we write the formulas, you're free to change these to different period options. So I'm going to select all of them, press Control T, click on My Table Has Headers. So we have a table now, and as the table is selected, go to Insert and then put Pivot Table. And I'm going to use existing worksheet, and I'm going to put the pivot table right here, say OK, drag and drop the period. So this gives us a pivot table, and click inside the pivot table, go to insert slicer, click on period, press OK. And now we have a slicer. As you click on the slicer, the cell D30 for me, this is where the selection is getting recorded. So this is great so far. So let's just give a name to the cell. So I'm going to click on that cell, which is B30, and I'm just going to call it I underscore period, which is what the user is selecting as a period they want to see. Now, how do I convert this into a starting date? Before I do that, I want to explain how the starting date needs to be. So, for example, if you have, no, let me type a formula equals today, right? This is today's date. And all of this, let me just put the date formula format, something that everybody across the world can easily understand. So 7th March. Okay, so today is 7th March when I'm recording this video. So now what I will give a name to this today. So I can go click on the cell in the name box here. I'm just going to type in TD for today. Again, just trying to make things easier. It's optional, but so TD is today's date. Now, if I want my stock price history chart to start from 5 days, where does my start date need to be? So I'm going to type in TD, which is today, minus 4. So if I start from the 3rd of March, I have 3rd to 7th, so 5 days of history, right? And so if I wanted to do month to date, so the month to date will be, I wanted to start from the beginning of the month. So you could do multiple ways. So I'm going to do end of month of today, which is TD, comma, minus 1. This will take us back to the end of the previous month, right? But I wanted to start from the beginning of this month. So I will do plus 1, give me the 1st of March. What if the user selects 1 month? I want to look at the history of 1 month. So in this case, I will use a simple formula to say e date of TD, comma, minus 1. So let's see what it gives us. It gives us 7th February. So 7th February to 7th March. If it is 3 months, what do I do? E date of TD minus, comma, minus 3. So that gives us 3 months. Same thing, I'll just do 6 for 6 months. Year to date, I want to go to the beginning of the year, so I will use a different formula. So I will do date of year of today, which is um, 2024 right now. But for the year to date, it's always, the month is always January when the year begins, comma, and the month day is always the 1st of January. So I'm just going to type in 1, comma 1, and this will give us 1 Jan. What if they type in 1 year? I want to go back, e date today, comma, minus 12. So it goes back 12 months to March of 2023. Now, if it is 5 years, I'm going to do TD, comma, minus 60. So 5 years, 60 months. So that puts us back to 2019. So what we have done so far is understand what the dates need to be if the user selects one of these. But the user is going to only select one. We need to make sure that we pick the starting date from here, right? So let's just type in selected start date is what? So we'll do a simple switch function to say I underscore period. So I underscore period is nothing but the cell B30, which is right now 1M, right? So whatever is in the value in that cell, if it is, let's say 5D, then use the value in this cell D18 as the starting date. What if it is month to date? Then we can do this. What if it is 1M? Then we use this date. You get the pattern there. So I'm sure there might be a more, if you have a lot more options, there is a more dynamic way to do this rather than me typing out every single thing. But we only have a few, so this works. And this also gives you a clear idea, what is happening and why we are doing this. So let's continue this for a few more seconds, year to date. And then I can also do 1Y, comma, if the user chooses 1Y, use that date. And then if the user chooses 5Y, or 5 years again, comma, just do this. Now, by default, I want to give a value. So by default, I always want to see, let's say 6 months. So I can choose this option, right, 6 month as my default value. So I'm going to press close parenthesis. So now it gives me a date. Let's change the format so that we can see the date. There you go. So when let's test it out. So if I'm changing it to 1 year, you see that it changed to for 7th March. If I do 3 months, December, 5 days. So clearly it's reacting to the slicer. So now that we have identified where the chart needs to start, all I need to do is to connect this to our chart. Right now, this is completely disconnected. So in order for this to be connected, we need to, I would like to give a name to this. So for example, I will say this cell is called C underscore start date. I use the C prefix because we are calculating it. So C for calculation. Again, you're welcome to name it however you would like. And now I can go to the main sheet here, and then in the start date formula, I can just type equals C underscore start underscore date. Okay, so now we have monthly, it starts from here. So let's say daily, and we have daily history. Now, because the slicer is in the other sheet, so I can go back here, Control X to cut the slicer, come back here, paste it, and now, because we are doing month to date, so what if I do 6 months? There we go. So 6 months, you can see that the start date is changing. And when this start date changes, the stock history function starts pulling more data from that start date. That's basically it. And then from there, the chart will get the data from this formula. So all of them are connected now. I can click on the slicer, go to the slicer, change this to, let's say, um, let's take a look at this. We'll do 0.5 as the height and maybe 4.5 is the width. And then we can expand the chart as well. I'm assuming this is the only thing you'll have on the sheet, not much information else. So you can make the chart as big as one if you want to be able to clearly see a lot of history. Now, I don't want the header, so I'm going to go display header. The other thing, just like we did the daily, weekly, monthly, I want to make sure that this is in the right sequence. So right now it's not. 1 month, 1 year, 3 months, 5 days. So clearly not in any order. So what we're going to do here, just like we did the daily, weekly, monthly, I'm going to go back here, select all of these values, go to File, Options, and this will allow us to go to Advanced, go down to the Custom List, and then it's already selected these values. So just hit Import. Okay. Okay. There we go. Go back to the chart, right click, slicer settings, descending, and then do ascending again. There we go. So now I think we are missing the 5 years. So what I'm going to do is increase the number of columns, 8 columns. There we go. So 5 days of history, month to date, 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, and then 1 year to date, which is from the beginning of the year, and then 1 year, and also 5 years. At the beginning, Microsoft only had like up to 5 years of history. Now it looks like we have a lot more. But anyway, if you want more, you can change the formula. Instead of 5 years, you can make it 10 years and so on. But basically, we have built a dynamic and interactive stock price history chart, pulling live data from Microsoft service, changing the dates automatically with the slicer, changing the period interval to daily, weekly, monthly, automatically the minimum point and the maximum point. Now we will be building the volume bar columns at the bottom, which will dynamically change, just like you just saw. So if I change it to year to date, you'll see that it still is there. And then the red and green or the orange and green colors, they represent the volumes when the price has increased from the prior period or decreased from the prior period. Based on that, we'll switch the colors. All of this dynamically in Microsoft Excel. Let's get started. So from where we left off, we had the chart, we had these columns and everything. Now what we're going to do is to build the green and the red volume columns. So I'm going to call it, let's say, green VOL. And essentially the formula that I want to write here will only populate the volume when the price is um, greater than the previous period. So the volume we already have, but we have to write a formula against it. The best way to do this with a dynamic array is I'm going to first name the column M into something which I can use in my formula. So in order to do so, keep in mind that all of these three columns are coming from a single formula we wrote in cell K3. So what I'm going to do now is go to formulas and then name manager. And you can see automatically, already that these are the previous names that we have created. So we're going to create a new one. And this one, I want to call it as, let's see what happened. Okay, there we go. A new one, I want to call this as R underscore VOL for volume, range of volume information. And for this, I'm going to use the simple formula index of cell K3. This is where my stock history function is. So in your worksheet, wherever you have written the formula for stock history, please use that reference and then put a hash and then comma, comma, third column, because we extracted the date, the price, and the volume. So volume is in the third column. So I put 3 and I press OK. So now R underscore VOL is the range where all my volume information is. So now I can go ahead and start writing my first formula. And this time I'm going to write a simple formula to say if R underscore price. So R underscore price is nothing but the column L, which is where we have the price. So if price is greater than, I'm going to use the offset function. And in the offset function, I'm going to pass our price again, comma, -1. So basically, I go back one row above, 0 columns. And then the height of this is essentially how many rows do we have in the R price. There we go. And then this should be good to go. Close the offset function. So if my price is greater than the price in the previous row, then I want to know because this is a green volume, I want to know the volume information. Otherwise, NA, open parenthesis, close parenthesis, we'll test it. So it all makes sense. So let's look at the price here. This is going back 2019, so 110.39. The next period or the next day, it increased. So when there is an increase, you want the volume. And then let's go back here to this point. Price reduced from 117.65 to 117.52. So when there is a decrease in price, I don't want the volume information to be displayed. So it looks like it's working. So I'm going to use the same concept, copy the formula, and go to the next cell, paste it. And now this time, if the price is less than the previous price, then I want the volume. So I'm going to hit enter. I didn't change anything else except the greater than becomes less than. And now I can call this red wall. Again, that's just a header that I'm giving here. It doesn't mean anything right now. But you can see here that when the price is increased, so for example, when the price decreases, the volume will be displayed. Same thing here, from 120 to 117. So you get the volume. So essentially now the volumes are getting populated correctly. Before we add them to the chart, I want to give them names. Because we want that our chart needs to be dynamic. How many our data points are shrinking or increasing, our chart will still work. So what I'm going to do now is to go to the name manager again, and I will write a new name, and I'm going to call this as R underscore, let's say, green. And then for this one, I'm going to refer to this cell where we wrote the formula for the green volume. This is P3, cell P3 for me. I'm going to put a hash at the end. This is extremely important. Press OK. Go again, do the same thing, R underscore red. And this time I will point to Q3 and then press hash. Okay. So now we have given names to these two new ranges of values. Now we need to add them to the chart. I click on the chart, select data, add, and this time I can add a name. So let's say I'm just going to use the green volume name. And for me to give a series values, I can click on any cell in my sheet, no problem. Make sure that if there is a 1 in front, remove it. Um, Basically, the sheet name, exclamation mark, everything after the exclamation mark, remove it, and then just type in R underscore D, because that's the name we gave. As soon as I hit tab, you will see that it is pulling in the volume information. I can see the numbers come through, so which is good. So press OK. For the x-axis or the horizontal axis, same thing, click anywhere inside the sheet and then come and remove all the exclamation after. And then I will do, this is dates. So x-axis is coming from R underscore dates. We covered that in the previous video. Please watch it if you didn't. And I'm going to add the red volume now. I can type it in, or I can just point it to the cell. Doesn't matter. We're not going to display it to the user in this exercise. Now, for the values though, click on anywhere and then remove everything after the exclamation mark and then do R underscore red because this is the red volume columns. Wow, you can see that the chart is changing. So not the way we want it, but that's okay. For the x-axis, again, I'll do the same as I did before, underscore dates, and then we'll fix the chart shortly. But we've done all the connections, right? So now it's all about just going back, changing the chart type. And this is important because we now have a lot of different series in our data, there are 5 series. So the closing price, I want it to be a line chart, no doubt about it. The minimum, I want it to be aligned with markers. The maximum is aligned with markers. But I'm going to move them to the secondary axis and keep my green and the red volume columns. So these are cluster column on my primary axis. So this is what I want. Just make note of this. Closing price, line chart type, secondary axis, minimum and maximum line with markers, secondary axis. Green volume and the red volume are clustered columns, primary axis. Say, okay, still doesn't look the way we want it, I know. So let me, reduce the history. 1 year still doesn't look the way we want it. So the one trick I do, because I don't want the columns to be so tall, I want them to not take up this much space. So one technique I've done is essentially adding a dummy series, which makes these columns shorter. So let's do year to date. Okay. First, we'll fix the color, and then we'll go and fix the height of the columns. So Control 1, after you click on the chart, Control 1, this allows you to go to the green volume columns, go to solid fill, choose green, yeah, green, no borders, that's fine. Go to the red volume, solid fill, choose, again, red, then the line. Great. So that's done. The easy part is done. Now let's do the little bit more hard part. How do I make sure that these columns don't take up the entire chart and go down a little bit in height? So I'm going to create a dummy series, and this dummy series is nothing but r underscore volume times 4. Okay. So again, the numbers are going to be much larger, right? So now I can go and say, add this to the chart. But before I can add this to the chart, I need to go to the name manager. So to define the name, I'll just leave it as dummy. Uh, uh, just point to the cell and then put a hash at the end. That's it. Go back to the chart, select, add, and it's a dummy series. So you can name it anything. And then I'm going to come back here and then remove everything after the exclamation mark and type in, I think I called it dummy or dummy. Okay. So if I were consistent, I should name it as r underscore dummy, but you get the concept. So I'm going to press OK, and it still doesn't look right. So I'm going to right click, change chart type, and the dummy one, I want it as a clustered column. Okay, and then in the primary. So don't switch on the secondary. So let me show you again. Closing price, line, all these three will be the secondary axis. The green volume, red volume, and a dummy series, they're all in a primary axis. Okay, so now it looks a little bit better. Now what I'm going to do is make sure that, now let's click on the chart again, press Control 1, and let's go to the dummy series. I don't want any fill, so remember that it's filling it up with the colors. I don't want it, so just no fill, no line. I just want that dummy data to be there so that Excel kind of thinks that the y-axis needs to be much larger, so the other, the green and the red columns or the volume columns become shorter. And again, this y-axis format axis, not sure why exactly that is doing it as a dollars, because previously we had the price in there, so that's probably why. We don't want that, so maybe you can change that into a number, and then you don't need the decimals. So make sure that you can go back to the display units and then change it to a larger number. For example, I could change to millions, and that will make the y-axis a lot cleaner. So this basically gives us the volume columns at the bottom with the green and the red alternating colors, and then we can still see the price history more clearly at the top. So instead of creating two separate charts, what we are trying to do is to have the line chart on the top and then the volume columns in the same chart at the bottom. So this is the technique that I used so far. And you can download this as a template that I published a while ago with all the functionality. And I'll put a link to this in the video descriptions. But basically what we have done is you type in any symbol. Let's just test it out. I'm going to type in Apple, and I don't know the symbol. So I typed in something, and you will see a question mark if you don't know what the symbol is. And then you can use the Excel's help. So basically, when you click on it, it'll say, okay, do you want Apple Inc. In the NASDAQ or Apple in whatever this exchange is? I'm going to choose this one for now. And so now it will tell Excel to go and grab the data for that specific stock symbol and pull it from the Microsoft service, and that brings the data into our columns KLM. From there, we can then create this chart of line, and then we added the minimum and the maximum to add or display the maximum data point and the minimum data point. And then we did this interactive slicer where we can change from daily trends to the weekly trends. And then we can always change the start and end date. So instead of going and changing the date manually, we built this slicer, which basically allows you to click a button and change the data that you're looking at, right? And then finally, we can always change back to a daily history or weekly and monthly. And then the columns at the bottom represent the volumes. And then you can you don't have to use those columns anymore once you have developed it. So you can make your sheet much cleaner, organize it the way you want it, increase the size of the chart if you want it. But basically the functionality is built. All you have to do is type in a symbol and then use the slices to interactively explore the stock price history data. If you have any suggestions on how to make this better, please let me know. I look forward to learning from you. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you soon in the next one.